and welcome to the kickoff event for Rain Taxi's 2021 Twin Cities Book Festival. I'm Erik Larson, Director of Rain Taxi. We're a nonprofit organization that champions aesthetically adventurous literature. If you don't yet know much about us, I invite you to check out our website anytime after this event to learn more about our quarterly magazine of critical writing and all the other great programs we produce to help drive readers to where writing is going, including the other upcoming virtual and in-person events in this festival. Tonight's event, like most of Rain Taxi's events, is free to attend. But if you're able to pitch in a little something, feel free to use the donate button at the bottom of your screen. Some funding for our festival comes from the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council and the Minnesota State Arts Board, thanks to legislative appropriations from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. But our most vital support actually comes from individual readers like you. Whether you're a one-time donor or you'd like to become a member and stay in touch with us year-round, we are grateful for your support. Don't forget, there are other ways you can participate on screen tonight. Many of you are already chiming in on the chat, so keep all those wonderful comments and observations coming. If you have a question for the authors, you can put that in the Ask a Question box, and we'll get to as many of those as possible at the end of the event. And of course, you can buy the book. And tonight, if you purchase a copy of Fuzz, that'll be accompanied by a signed bookplate. And you'll be supporting not only Rain Taxi, but also our friends at Majors and Quinn Booksellers, a great independent bookstore here in the Twin Cities. With Fuzz now in my hands, it's my great pleasure to welcome to our virtual stage Mary Roach and Erik Larson. If you Google Mary Roach, one of the questions that comes up is Mary Roach a comedian? I'm not sure how she'd answer it, but I will tell you that the last time she was with us at our Twin Cities Book Festival back in 2006, the building manager of the venue complained to me about the decibel level of the laughter at her event, making it the best conversation with a building manager I've ever had. As we've seen over and over again in books like Stiff and Bonk and Gulp, her writing indeed offers a powerful cocktail of erudition and humor, and both ingredients are at maximum strength in Fuzz, an irresistible investigation into the unpredictable places where wildlife and humans meet. Erik Larson wrote about Fuzz that it'll make you snort coffee through your nose. I found this to be one of the most practical blurbs of all time, as my reading of the book might have gotten a bit messy had I not heeded its implicit instruction. Erik Larson, of course, is the best-selling author of so many great nonfiction explorations, including The Splendid and the Vile and The Devil in the White City, to name just two. I am just so delighted that he can lead our conversation with Mary Roach tonight. So please, make some noise at home for these two. They can't hear you, but it'll make you feel good. And welcome Mary Roach and Erik Larson.
Okay, so Mary, knowing that I was going to talk to you about Fuzz, got me thinking about interactions with wildlife. And I realized that on a daily basis, how many of them I have. I mean, unpleasant. For example, at this moment, in fact, there is a squirrel really energetically trying to get at my bird feeder. I have carpenter bees who are routinely trying to drill holes into my rafters. The other day, my wife was taking a walk through the neighborhood, a residential neighborhood, and encountered a buck with I don't know how many points on his antlers. And the buck was like, "What are you doing in my neighborhood?" And she turned around and walked away. And I'm not even going to talk about the tick problem out here on the east end of Long Island. Forget it. You can't walk without getting covered with, myriad deer ticks and so forth. So I'm delighted to be able to talk to you about, this whole world. First, congratulations on the book. Your first book was, I believe, Stiff, which came out in 2003. Grimly hilarious, about the science of basically cadavers. Then came such varied books as Bonk, which I particularly liked, about sex. And Spook, about the afterlife, all centered on these odd scientific pursuits involved in those fields. So what I'm really curious about, I'm sure members of the audience are as well, is how you find your ideas. I mean, let's talk about through the lens of Fuzz. And when I say find these ideas, I mean, what happened with Fuzz? What was the proximate cause of this book?
The proximate cause. It's an interesting story, sort of interesting. It's never a tidy origin story. Like, I can't say, well, when I was young, I was attacked by wolves, and I don't have like a personal passion that led me to any of my books. I wasn't raised by morticians. I mean, stiff is another thing that kind of people wonder how I got there. I write books for a living, and so when I finish one, I kind of panic and I think, what am I doing next? I've got to have a book topic. And it's got to be something that will be of interest to a large enough number of people that the publisher will want to publish it, but also something that I want to spend 2.5 years with. So all of those things are going through my head, and there's often a lot of dead ends and false starts. For this book, I got interested in a roundabout way. I was up at the National Wildlife Forensics Laboratory in Ashland, Oregon, which I went up there just sort of poking around, thinking maybe this is an article, maybe there's an idea for a book. I don't know. There's a woman up there who has the world's most extensive hair library. This is hair from different animals, which, so for any given animal, there'll be guard hairs, undercoat hairs, regular hairs, whiskers. So it's this, which to me is fascinating, that there's such a thing as a hair library. And I just like the sound of that. And so I was sort of poking around, also found out that this woman is the author of an 8-page guide to how to distinguish fake versus real dried tiger penis. So that
very important to know that, I would think.
I now know. And if you have any dried tiger penis and you want to know the authenticity of it, just send me a photograph and I can tell you. I've learned that. Anyway, well, she needs to know that to tell if it's, counterfeit contraband material shows up in the U.S. It's sent to her. She has to look at it and see what it is. Is it an endangered species? Is this person breaking the law? Anyway, I'm up there thinking, this is kind of cool. What book can I build around this? I kind of look for books from the inside out. Like, I start with something specific that fascinates me, and then I think, how could I build, what would be the umbrella over, what would be the topic that would encompass this? And so I'm up there kind of poking around at this forensics lab, and then I meet with the director, and he says, no, you can't tag along with any investigators on an open case. That is illegal. Dead stop. Goodbye. So that doesn't work for me. Unlike you, I want things happening in real time. So I'm looking for, scenes that I'm can step into, and conversations and things to describe. And without being able to tag along with any investigators, that didn't seem to be promising. So at a certain point, I kind of turned it around and thought, well, what about wildlife as the perpetrator and not the victims? And that led me to a science that I had never heard of called human-wildlife conflict. And anytime I kind of find a pocket of science that I didn't know existed, I get kind of excited. So I headed off in that direction, initially thinking I can blend the two. Like, I could keep my tiger penises and my headless walruses. That was another case they were investigating, the mystery of the walruses washing up on shore without heads. And they were trying to figure out, with the heads, did they come off naturally in the water as they decomposed, or were they sawed off for the tusks? Anyway, I tried to smush these together. Didn't work. Ended up deciding it would be cleaner just to break it down by wildlife crime. So we have the felony crimes in the first half of the book, murder, manslaughter, home invasion, breaking and entering, all of which animals do. Obviously not breaking the law. They don't know that we have laws. They can't read the laws. You can't give them tickets. But it was a tidy way for me to structure the book by crime. So the second half is more your misdemeanors, your vandalism, your jaywalking, your littering. So it evolved over a couple, well, months. Took months.
Yeah,
I'm embarrassed to say how long it took me to figure it out.
You're talking about book at this point. But when did this whole thing morph into the idea that, this is something that I'm working on as a serious book. I'm thinking about how this is going to be structured and so forth. And more to the point, when you went up there to visit this laboratory, did you have other ideas on your plate? Or were you just completely bereft and this was a Hail Mary visit? This was a kind of
I don't believe I had other stuff. Not really so much a Hail Mary as like a sense that this seems promising, but I can't tell till I go up and spend time with people. It's very hard for me to get a sense of, will this work as a part of a book just by poking around on the internet or just emailing people? This was something where I thought it was interesting enough that I had a sense that there's a lot more going on there. And there was incredibly interesting stuff that was going on, except that what I didn't realize is that I can't step into the process and I can't be part of an investigation as it unfolds, which is what I wanted to do. So it wasn't so much a Hail Mary pass as a sniffing around and just, I know that I just don't know what this world is till I step into it. And so it's a waste of money. I flew up to Ashland, Oregon, stayed a couple days, came home, and that was that was a little bit expensive for a trip that led nowhere. But I didn't know it. I don't know otherwise sometimes unless I spend a little time with folks. So
when did you pull the trigger on it? I mean, when did you just say, okay, by God, this is going to be my next book?
Well, I had the other thing that happened around this time, I stumbled onto, and I can't remember how I ended up stumbling onto this. It's a book from 1906 called The Criminal Prosecution and Capital Punishment of Animals. And it chronicles 1500s, 1600s, and 1700s, this approach to animal conflict and animal crime to using the legal system. So these were animals put on trial, held in prison, sometimes executed for crimes ranging from like caterpillars eating the crops or an animal that kills a small child. So and at first I thought it was a hoax, but it's not. It's very well documented, 400-page book. So that kind of helped cement things. And then what I do is I throw together, it's not a proposal, it's almost more like a treatment. It's just, you know what it is? It's just an email to my agent going, this is kind of what I'm thinking about. Is this stupid? He's my sounding board. So I just kind of go, like, is there anything here? Could this work? What do you think about this? And then it's a conversation back and forth. And he's not afraid to say, this sounds stupid. This sounds stale. This sounds too close to what you've done before. This sounds like no one will buy it. So
what did he say?
I don't really remember, but he must have said something positive, because I went and wrote up a quick proposal, which is, I don't do a full length proposal anymore.
I was going to ask you that. Are you at the point now where you're Mary Roach and you can just pitch this thing to an editor over cocktails, which is a dangerous thing, but is
it is a dangerous thing. Yes, it is. Yes. I think I have pitched a book over cocktails, and it was bonk. So that was okay. That was an easy one.
That's an appropriate one to pitch over cocktails.
Yes, yeah. I don't do a full proposal, but I do a shorter version of it, partly because I feel like in order to show myself that there's enough here for a book, I need to do enough research just to put together some kind of document. Because if I just, if you just sit down over cocktails and go, hey, how about this? And your editor goes, yeah, sounds like great, go ahead. And then you sell the book, and then you realize, I don't have a clue what I'm doing. I don't think this is going to work. And I backed out of things that I've kind of told to my editor and then realized it doesn't work.
Well, have you ever embarked on a project and actually gotten well down the road? You've committed to this. You called this a book in your dreams, and your publisher may even have signed off. And then you're like, no, it's not there.
Yeah, I hadn't signed a contract yet, but I spent 2 months looking into it and trying to set it up. It was a book I wanted to report on the science of natural disasters and preparing for them and the aftermath and the science of the various aspects of major disasters. And there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of things I could do with it. But the one critical piece of that would be for me to get myself onto the scene after a major earthquake or a major flood or something happening, probably not in my own backyard. And that's not easy to prep for. You have, first of all, someone has to get you in there, and often the airport is closed down. There's nowhere to stay, and where there is to stay should be given to the first responders. Also, when there's a big earthquake or major disaster, an incident command system is set up, and I would be considered press, and the press is just treated like you will get a briefing at 3:00 every day. And that doesn't work for me. I wanted to be, climbing on the rubble. I wanted to be out there with the people with the cadaver dogs, whatever. I wanted to immerse myself in it. And that was very difficult. Also because you can't plan it. You're going to get a call in the middle of the night. Yeah, well, there's been a 7.5 earthquake in Pakistan. No, I've got to get there. And I need to be there fast, and I can't get there a week later because the things I want to report on are happening right now. So I'd have to instantly somehow transport myself there. I even had some folks in the military who were willing to kind of, if I could get to a nearby base to where I live, they could get me there, but they're like, we can't tell you where you're going to stay and we can't get you out, but we'll get you there. So I was willing to do that, but it just was logistically too hard. And I'm optimistic to the point of stupidity. I kept hammering away. I'd be like, first I'll call Red Cross. I called, Doctors Without Borders. I talked to the military. I was like, there's got to be a way I can do this. But it was just too logistically difficult. And I spent a couple of months on that. I'd say that's the most time I've spent. What's the most time you've spent on something that turned out to be
I've spent 6 months on a full-blown proposal and sent it to my agent. The minute I sent it to him, I realized, nope, it's not right for me. And so went back to square one. But then I'm a hard case. I second guess. I doubt myself. I'm the whole work. So sort of my next question for you is like as you go along, are you confident throughout? You strike me as a very confident person. That you. Okay, maybe not. Anyway, yeah. Are you a confident person?
No, not at all. There is a constant voice in my head when I'm working on a book that is saying, what are you doing? You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't even know what this book is about. You don't know who's going to read it. You're going to get horrible reviews. It's either too trivial or it's too stupid, or you think you're funny and you're not. I have that all playing on a loop in my head.
Oh, good. That's reassuring to hear. So your publisher says, all right, we love this idea. Go forth and do this book. What is your next step?
Well, my proposals, I imagine, are not like yours, Erik. I think that mine are dashed off at a point where I know very, very little about what I'm about to embark on, the topic that is. So the proposal, if you held it up to the book, there's not a lot of overlap. There's maybe a third of what's in the proposal ends up in the book. So I'm doing a lot of just a sort of groping and grasping and just emailing people just to get the lay of the land and figure out my first order of business. A little bit more like a documentary filmmaker would be looking for scenes, settings. I'm trying to find characters who are working in this area who might be doing something in the next couple of years that I could step in, shadow them, hang around with them. So that's my main focus, because once I've got those narrative pieces and the places that I'm going to go and the scenes, the ancillary reporting is the easy part. You know, that I can get that anytime. I can go to an archive, or I can get the journal articles, call the various people. I can get that stuff to fill in the science and the information. So I am just endlessly sending emails. Hello, I'm an author, Mary Roach, and I'm getting started on. It's almost this. I can almost recite it from heart. You know, I'm just getting rolling on a new book about fill in the blank. I've read your da 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 da, and I'm wondering what you'll be up to in the next couple of years, and whether I might come and visit. So I'm doing that a lot.
So when you start calling these people, what is their reaction? Do you think is it, uh-oh, Mary Roach is on the phone? What's that going to mean? Or are they delighted? I mean, do they treat you more like the Gary Larson of nonfiction books? You know, as you know, the scientists adored Gary Larson.
Yes.
Peppered the world with his cartoon.
Exactly. And I would have thought that as I became better known and people knew what my books were like, I would have thought this might have worked against me. Like people would have, because people, this is their career and they're very serious about it. And it's important to them. And they're letting me come in, and who knows what I'm going to take away, or how I'm going to describe it and them. And I could certainly imagine people going, it'd be a lot easier just to say no to her. But people who are familiar with my work tend to be really welcoming, which is great. They've been they are delighted to be in the book if they're familiar with me. At least half of them are not. And those people, I always say, I'd like to send you a book.
Which book do you send them?
I try to tailor it maybe to what I know about them, what they might find interesting, or so it kind of depends. I'll often say, here's a list, some information about the books. Let me know which one you'd like. So I let them choose it, but I just want them to know what they're in for.
Yeah. I'm struck by the fact that reading your books is that you treat the science very respectfully. You let the science itself. I mean, you're dealing with this sort of obsessive, deep focused stuff, and almost invariably, that kind of thing leads down funny paths. But it strikes me that there are two ways to approach that. You can jump up and down and say, "Wow, this is so funny! This is so funny," or you treat it in a very deadpan manner where you just let the science do that thing. And that's what I sense in your books. And I think people respect that.
Yeah.
Is that a conscious decision on your part?
I don't ever want to be making the jokes. I don't want to be ever saying, wow, I'm sitting in a lab with this woman whose entire career is devoted to saliva. It's spit, like that to me is cheesy and cheap.
Right.
But the humor comes from me spending an afternoon with this woman, and the fact that the saliva. This is from Gulp. I'm talking about this woman who studies saliva, spit, is this fantastically beautiful, well-dressed Italian woman. So you just don't, and the juxtaposition of her and the way she looks and her passion for spit, it just is it's not yuck funny, but it's sort of delightfully bizarre. And so that kind of situation is always what I'm hoping for. And it isn't, there's absolutely no disrespect. I mean, I was awed by the things saliva. And don't get me started on saliva. It's a really amazing substance. It really, truly is. And so I began to share her passion for that. And so the humor is never me saying a funny line, or it's often me being an idiot and getting myself into scenarios where I don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm just kind of a bumbling goober. so in that sense, sometimes the humor comes from me, but the funniest lines are always someone else's, or they're just the situation is kind of delightfully bizarre.
Yeah, or somebody says something offhand, like in the case of the guys who was that at the Do I have this right? WART, W-H-A-R-T?
Yes, WART. Wildlife Human Attack Response Training.
And, and the Canadians saying, oh, you know, so the inside jokes, yeah, well, hanging by a tendon or two.
Oh, yeah. It was like
that.
Oh, yeah. His eyes hanging by two, three tendons, right? You know, the accent was just the juxtaposition of that kind of folksy Canadian, you know, the, you know, interrogative at the end just killed me. Yeah. 2, 3 tendons, right? You know,
well, very, very Fargo-like, you know, the movie.
Exactly. Yeah. So, that kind of thing. I live for that, you know, or a guy who steps into the elevator with his colleague at that same conference, just saying, did you ever tase an elk? You know, just like, I don't know. You don't expect, you step into elevator in a hotel, you don't expect to hear somebody say, did you ever tase an elk?
So in the course of your research, I mean, you must have had, I always refer to them as died and gone to heaven moments, where you come across something that is just so perfect for the thing you're working on that you just can't stand it, you know? I mean,
oh yeah.
Give me a couple of those from the Fuzz journey.
Excuse me. Well, 2, 3 tendons, right? You know, there was a lot of that in that conference. Just the juxtaposition. Okay, this conference it's basically the forensics of an attack scene. Like when a human is killed by an animal, the scene is cordoned off, you know, with a yellow ribbon, and wildlife professionals come in to gather evidence and also to try to figure out, you know, who did this crime? What species? Was it a bear? Was it a cougar? Was it a human? So that was fascinating, but also fascinating was that this conference on wildlife attack response training was held at a cheesy casino outside Reno. So this conference, the indoor
which in itself is funny.
Which is in itself funny. Yeah, exactly. There were a lot of, and when I heard that, I was like, this will be good. So there are these, you know, we show up at there's a big room that we're all in for the classroom portion of it. And in the very next conference room, which is separated only by a kind of one of those dividers you pull across, it's not a solid wall, so the sound transfers, is a large bingo game. So the bingo people must have really wondered, because there was this moment where somebody was showing a slide of it's people on a safari, and a lion is charging at somebody. They're trying to say, look, you know, you have to stay together because somebody shooting at the lion could shoot you if you're behind. Anyway, it was like a tactical thing. But there's this roaring, just this like the sound of the lion, and you just imagine the people in the bingo room going, what the hell is going on over there in the next room? So there was lots of moments at that conference that just this wonderful juxtaposition of.
That's pretty funny. What's your absolute favorite story in the book?
My favorite story in the book. You know what? I love the scene, and it's not. It almost says it's nothing to do with. It has to do with people more than animals. The scene where I'm in New Delhi, which is plagued by macaques. I should say vexed more. There's these troops of monkeys that run around and they steal people's cell phones, which they then ransom for fruit. They grab things. They'll pull your pockets inside out. They go into the medical institute, pull an IV out and suck the glucose. I mean, they are just, first of all, hilarious, the monkeys. Everything about the monkeys is fairly hilarious. But I went to the bureaucratic heart of Delhi, the South Delhi Municipal Corporation, massive high-rise bureaucracy, to speak with the veterinary unit, this one man who's sort of in charge of dealing with the monkeys. And he doesn't feel that it's his job. He feels it should be the wildlife guy, the guy who's in charge of wildlife, because these are wild animals. Meanwhile, the wildlife guy is like, they're not wild anymore. They're in the city. They're your job. So they keep, just trying to pass it off on the other guy. So it's this scene where I'm sitting at his desk, and everything I ask him about the monkeys, he'll say, That is the purview of Dr. Ishwar Singh, the Forest Department of Delhi. Do you know him? Do you have his number? You know, every single, and I was like, why am I here? And he keeps, just, it goes on and on. Every question I'll say, yes, that is another department, the Forest Department, Dr. Ishwar Singh. Have you spoken to him? And it just, I don't know, the bureaucracy and this man's frustrations with me and with the situation. And, you know, just finally he just stops and he goes, what would you do about this situation? What would you do? And it's just like he really had no idea how to handle this. And it's just like, maybe you have an idea. So that, I loved that scene just because, I don't know, Indian bureaucracy is entertaining.
Yeah.
In its own way.
So you know, you accumulate in the course of how long do you do sort of the hardcore research before you sit down to write? Basically 2 years.
Well, you know what? I don't split it. I don't do that thing where you do all the research and then you start to write. Which I think with something like your books, where you've got these, you know, a narrative starts here and it continues chronologically through, or two narratives often. So you kind of have to know what your whole story is in order to know how much time do I spend on this portion and how do I pace this, right? Do you do all your research first?
I do as much as I can. You're right. I mean, it's a little different if you're trying to construct a narrative versus you're sort of more episodic. Would you say? Right.
Yeah, episodic is a good way rather than, yes, there's other words you could use for that. Random, chaotic. But when I have enough, when I have all the material for a chapter, I will sit down and write it. Partly because I want to do it while it's fresh, and I know that I don't know where it's going to fit in the overall arc of the book. So I may have to move it around and I may have to change the beginning or end so that it flows better. But I feel like I want to start writing as early as I can. And those first chapters often get a lot of rewriting.
Especially that would be very important with your work, because you need to, by the time you get into the trenches at the end of the process, you need to be able to, may sound funny, but you need to remember what was funny and what wasn't.
Yeah, right. Yes, it is. I've sometimes, like for Grunt, the very first place I went was the morgue at Dover, where when soldiers who've been killed come back to the U.S., they're processed through the morgue there. And I knew when I went there that would be the end of the book. But I didn't want to write the end until I'd written the rest of the book. So it was a long delay, and that made me uncomfortable. Like, am I going to, well, as it turns out, it was kind of hard to forget what I saw there. But ideally, I want to write it a little sooner. I remember hearing Susan Orlean say that she would, I think it was for maybe the Rin Tin Tin book, like 7 years. One of the books was like 7 years of reporting, boxes and boxes of material. And then she sat down to write it. I could not do that.
So before we go to audience questions, something I have to ask you about. One of the things that I love also is your footnotes, especially in this book. You know, when I read one of your books, you know, it's like there's the narrative, but then there's this sly, contrapuntal chronicle of all the things, and I'm guessing are things that you just were dying to use, but there was no place for it. So one comes to mind that is my all-time favorite, which is on page 127, where you talk about how the CIA put a trap. But why don't you tell that story?
Oh God, maybe I should read the footnote.
Well, if they put a trap under the toilet in Blair House in Washington, D.C., which were the quarters of Khrushchev when he was visiting, with the idea of seeing what they could collect in this trap and what clues they could garner about Khrushchev.
Yes, from his poop.
And I thought that was hilarious. And where did that come from? Where'd you find that?
I'm glad you asked that. This is where this came from, because this footnote is so far off topic and it is so long. It's almost a full page.
It is. It is.
And turning the calendar back about 3 or 4 years. I did an event with Adam Savage, the Mythbusters guy.
Yep.
And it was for Gulp, my book Gulp. And so he said, I heard a rumor that when heads of state would come to the White House to visit, that there was a trap in the toilet so they could collect their shit and they could do an analysis to see are there any medical issues or whatever. And he said, and I don't know if that's true. So is that true? And I couldn't answer that question because I didn't know. And I felt so bad. I was like, I'd like to be able to answer that question. And I promised him I would get the answer to that question. So when I was writing in Fuzz about how if you're trying to figure out the population count of animals in a region, it's easier to count the piles of poop than it is to, try to look and see where all the animals are. So, sort of shit as proxy for shitter. So I was talking about just how, wildlife biology is a kind of snooping. You're snooping on these animals, like, in looking into their crap. And so I realized this is the moment for that piece of information that Adam had asked about. And I found, I don't know how, but I don't remember how I came to it, but there's a guy who writes for like Counterintelligence and Counterintelligence Monthly, who's working on a book about the CIA medical division. And there was I don't know if there still is, but there's physicians and other medical professionals who are employed by the CIA. And yes, they did actually they were collecting the shit. There was also a couple of airplane flights, the Indonesian Sukarno, maybe. They got his urine from put a collecting device in the toilet on the airplane. Wow. But he had more, it went on and on about the stories. And I was like, well, what can they really, what can you really learn from that? He's like, not a whole lot, parasites. I mean, this is before DNA analysis. But anyway, I couldn't leave that out, partly because I promised Adam. It's basically a footnote written for Adam Savage.
Well, good. What have you ever come across something that is scientifically or otherwise just so disgustingly shocking and repugnant that you felt you just could not put it in the book? Now, I'd imagine your bar is fairly low because you have crucial shit. But have you ever felt that there was just you can't go there? No,
I haven't. But my editor has.
Enough.
No, the answer is no, Erik. But I did have a scene in Bonk that my editor, she just, it's about 2 paragraphs long, and she took her pencil and she put a line through it and she wrote, no. Okay,
can I ask what?
Yeah, okay, all right. So I was in Egypt visiting with a doctor, Ahmed Shafiq, who is no longer with us. Because Dr. Shafiq, well, there are various reasons why I really wanted to see this man, but he claimed to have done various studies of these reflexes that happen during sexual intercourse. And he said, and I can demonstrate some of these to you. And I was like, what? I don't know how that is. So I was like, I don't need to know anymore. I'm going to Egypt. Because also various other reasons why this guy was fascinating to me. But while I was there, I got there on the appointed day, and he said, yes, well, the volunteers for the demonstration are not here. So I can show you some other interesting reflexes. So he has this man come in who dressed in scrubs, perhaps a nurse, I'm guessing. And this guy stands up on the bed and drops his scrubs, turns around, and Dr. Shafiq has one of those pointers, that if you have a lecture, the telescoping silver pointer. He has a pointer, and he's pointing to this man's asshole, and he demonstrates the anal wink reflex. Okay, where you scratch beside the anus, and it goes like it winks. It's probably like, okay, I'm going to seal this off. It probably is a protective reflex. And I wrote it up, and I also said I flashed on when I was a kid. For Easter, my mother would give me these sugar eggs, and there's a little opening, and you'd look through the opening, and there'd be bunnies in there inside the egg for Easter. And I went off on that tangent too, that I flashed on that. And there's this poor guy dropped his pants, and my editor wisely just went, No.
I get it.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it.
You asked.
Well, so maybe on that note, we should go to some questions.
Yeah.
Erik, you're the asker.
On that note, incredible. The director.
I love it. You should have left it in, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no.
Well, thank you both so much. This was an incredible taste of this amazing book, and I want to remind our viewers that you can still purchase a copy of Fuzz and get that signed book plate with your copy. We've got some great questions lined up, and I want to start with this one for Mary. Did your research for the book change how you viewed your own interactions with any animals, wild animals or even non-wild animals? Yeah.
That's a great question. In particular, it kind of changed how I feel about the animals that we so blithely refer to as pests, like rodents and birds that get in the eaves and mice in the rafters of the inside the walls. And, we, because of the word pest, I think we tend to just figure, oh, it's something to be dealt with. We'll call the exterminator, we get a trap. You call the guy to, the wildlife control trapping guy. And because I know the consequences of all those things now, I'm a little more inclined to try to practice exclusion, and it's a bit of a fun challenge to figure out, okay, how is this creature, what does it want from me, why is it here, and how can I stymie it, how can I keep it out, how can I block it from getting in? And there are ways to do that. And that happened. We had a roof rat which ran across the deck one day when I was reading, and initially I was like, it's a rat, and I had that rat reaction that get a trap. And then I thought, okay, little Miss Coexistence, what let's think about this, and I set up my wildlife camera and I sort of figured out what his kind of run was and where he was going. And we figured out where the hole was and we blocked it. And because he'd been getting into the wall, he or she. And I felt pretty good about that because we didn't, and I see that little guy on my wildlife camera. I see him around and he's he's like a little friend now. It's like, okay, hi there. So yeah, and for that reason, I included in the book at the back of the book, there's a couple of resources I refer people to. The Humane Society of the United States has a what to do with, and it's like species by species, these animals that kind of get all up in our business. And there's really great suggestions about how to deal with them humanely without killing them. So yeah, though I definitely have changed a little bit in that area.
Right. Wonderful. Another person comments, and I think speaks for a lot of us, that some of our favorite parts of your books are when you're describing how an expert that you talk to responds to your often hilariously strange questions. Our viewer wants to know, do you ever get embarrassed? I mean, what's your own threshold for that?
Yeah, I got no shame. I don't get embarrassed. I really don't. I just, when I show up, I kind of just make it clear I don't know very much about this world, and I'm going to ask you really ridiculously simple questions. Please bear with me, and thank you for sort of being my tutor, because I kind of, when I show up, I'm sort of asking these people to be unpaid tutors, to just sort of fill me in on this world, because I don't even know what the right questions are to ask when I show up. And I think that's a good thing. I just, I know what the things I thought that I wanted to know, but I want them to lead me to what's most interesting. So I'm just not at all embarrassed to be an idiot.
Yeah, but that's the beauty of coming in cold, is because you will ask those things that if another expert came in, they say, oh yeah, well, I know exactly what that is. I'm not going to talk about that. But you come in as the eyes and ears of the lay reader. Right. And to you, this is endlessly fascinating.
Exactly. I'm coming in with the same kind of sense of wonder and curiosity that the reader would have. Whereas if this was my profession, the things that would be of interest to me are just so far down the rabbit hole. They're so beyond what the average reader would kind of be able to get into. So it is an advantage. The disadvantage is that I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm always at peril of getting it wrong. So I'm careful to, I show the chapter, I read the chapter to the main expert in the that I've talked to, just to make sure I've got it right.
Do you ever use a fact checker?
Not only in that the person in the I have the person in the chapter check the fact, everything. Yeah, I read it to them.
Or a sensitivity reader?
Oh, well, I have a.
That's maybe you can explain that to the audience. That's a new thing.
Yes, that's a new thing. A sensitivity reader is, and it's more for I think young adult books. But although I don't know, how widespread is it? So it's somebody who's going to go in and say, well, this may trigger the reader. This may be upsetting, or your portrayal of this. It's in YA fiction. They may say your portrayal of this African-American boy is stereotypical, or it's, the role that he's. So it's somebody who comes in and kind of reads the manuscript. And I think that this is. Would this sound accurate, Erik?
Yeah. But I would say that it's no longer just young adult stories. It's sort of metastasizing into other realms.
Yes, I have a copy,
better or worse. But
yeah, I have a copy editor who definitely has that in mind, and she's done my last 2 books, and she has flagged things like I described. And there was a researcher in New Zealand who her job has to do with making sure traps are humane. And it's a brutally grisly job. It's noble that they're trying to make this traps, they're trying to deal with invasive species there. But it's a pretty dark job. And she herself I described her as young, pretty, and with freckles on her nose, because it's trying to set up the contrast between her work and the fact that she's just adorable, really not what you'd picture for like somebody who's testing traps. And how humane are they? And my copy editor flagged the word pretty and said, you can't call her pretty, because it's dismissive of her as a professional, whatever. So that kind of thing. Yeah, there's always 2 or 3 things that would never have occurred to me. The word powwow, I had the word powwow in this book as in a synonym for meeting. People got together for a powwow. And she didn't. Someone else, an early reader, said that's offensive to Native Americans, which I didn't know. So I'm grateful that they flagged those things for me. I don't have a whole separate sensitivity read because I don't know. To a certain extent, I think my whole books would fail. My entire oeuvre would be out the door. Like, I'm sorry, Mary, I don't think anything in this book is appropriate.
That's funny.
What a great conversation about some nuts and bolts in writing, and a good lead into this next one, because someone points out that a common denominator between both of your writing, this question is for both of you, is that you both make nonfiction so exciting, so thrilling, so dramatic. It reads like fiction often, and they want to know, how do you do that? What are the, how do you get that voice in there, that strong personal voice, and at the same time really remain faithful to the fact that you're representing, factual source material?
Well, I want to let Erik answer this.
No, I'm going to.
No.
Your show, Mary.
No, I would love for you to answer this one, because I've heard you talk about this and it's amazing. I mean, I've read all of your books except one, and I marvel at how you stick to. I mean, I know that you don't even describe a storefront unless you've gone on the Chase something or other insurance company with the photographs of every storefront.
Sanborn insurance maps,
Sanborn. I was going to say Chase and Sanborn, but that's coffee, isn't it? Anyway, but the way that you do what you do is extraordinary and a mystery to me. So take it away. You answer that one.
Well, you and I approach it things from different directions. You, again, more episodic. Me from the narrative perspective. But in both cases, the bottom line is you have to have the material. You have to have the material. In your case, you've got to drill really deep, because otherwise it's just not going to be funny. You have to find all this material. for me, it's more that, if I'm going to make this into what we call narrative nonfiction, where it's a story where you come to feel part of the story as if it's unfolding around you, you have to have all that fine-grained material, and having it creates the illusion of something that moves as if it's fiction, but it's all absolutely the real deal. It's just that thanks to the beauty of the reader's mind, it's the reader's mind that makes things move. I'm convinced. You can put 3 things in a paragraph and the reader's mind connects those in a beautiful way where it becomes something very different than what perhaps the words themselves indicate. But anyway, I could spout for hours.
It's just, you must have to just find this tremendous archival bounty. With someone as well documented as Churchill, that you could imagine that there might be too much material.
Yeah, that was a nightmare. That was a nightmare. Thank you.
Yeah, I would imagine so. But I was thinking like Dead Wake, that you had the material from, the submarine, the U-boat guy, and then, that you had to have 2 separate piles of great detail and you couldn't have gaps in one of the narratives while the other, you can't just leave one empty. Just that you must spend so much time hunting down the right.
Contraire, one of the beauties of writing narrative nonfiction is that when you don't have something, you can't fake it, you can't make it up. That's why God made white space, a text break.
Yeah, right.
Works wonders.
Yeah.
Anyway, good. Erik, yes.
No, fantastic. And speaking of all that source material you both waded through, did the pandemic make research harder or any different in any way?
Yeah, Mary, I wanted to ask you about that. How'd you fare?
Well, I was fortunate in that I was almost done with all of the research.
I was wondering.
Yeah, because it would have absolutely derailed me. I could not have done it. I would have had, I don't know what I would have just had to set the whole project aside, because as it was, there was one chapter that I dropped, which was fine. It wasn't the best chapter. So yeah, I can't do my reporting by Zoom. I just, for the narrative spine of a chapter, the scenes and the conversations and the people, I got to go there. So that would have been a disaster.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, I don't know. I ended up, I spent the year, I did projects like I did a middle grade adaptation of Packing for Mars. There's things that I could work on that didn't require going anywhere, but I felt so bad for anyone in the midst of reporting that required travel. Where were you at, Erik?
Well, my book, The Spotlight and the Vial, had just launched, and I had gotten about 2.5 weeks or so into my book tour when everything just shut down. Everything shut down. And honestly, the book had achieved what I wanted to achieve by that point. You know how that is? Yeah. And then you some of your tours, I'm sure you felt the same way. And it's like, okay, can I go home now? Right? Yeah. Well, in this case, the fates sort of said, yeah, you can go home. You better go home. And so for better or worse, I wound up having the book launched and spent that time then during the pandemic looking for my next idea. So it really actually worked out okay for me. And thankfully we all stayed well, at least at this end of the world. Yeah.
Thankfully, indeed. By the way, we have viewers volunteering to be research assistants for either one of you. But we'll end on this question again for both of you. You're both enormously successful writers. You each have 6 bestsellers to your name and counting. But if writing hadn't worked out, what other profession do you think you might have been successful at?
Mary?
I have no other skills. I don't know what I would have done if I couldn't write, if that wasn't an option. I think documentary filmmaking appeals to me a lot, just because it's a similar stepping into foreign worlds and meeting people that you couldn't imagine meeting. And that, although I don't have any filmmaking or editing or sound skills, I'd have to pick that up. But that is appealing. I used to think, I'd like to be some, entomologist who's off in the far flung, because I love to go to the places on the map where there's nothing there, where you're like, what's it like there? So I could imagine some branch of the sciences, but I don't think it would have worked out well for me, because I'm kind of a short attention span. I don't get along well in academics. There would have been some problems there. So I'm just damn lucky I ended up writing books.
I know. I kind of feel the same way. I think I would. I like to paint, and I think I would have. I like to think that maybe if I'd focused and gotten my, some art degree at RISD or something, that maybe I'd be, making a living as a painter. But that could also be a pretty far-fetched dream.
Wow. Do you do abstract or representational? What kind of painting?
Representation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Wow. Is there anywhere people can see your paintings?
No. I'm also very private about them. So.
Oh, okay. Is that up in the corner there behind your head? Is that?
No, that's
okay.
not. No.
Damn it.
Well, the cat's out of the bag. We'll see what happens. Meanwhile, thank you both again for this amazing taste of Fuzz. I want to tell folks there are 15 fantastic chapters in this book. It is so jam-packed and fun-filled, and I urge you all to get a copy. As we close out our session tonight, I just want to remind our viewers that we have many other great book festival events coming up. We'll put a link in the chat for you to check them out. And I want to thank our media sponsors, Minneapolis St. Paul Magazine, Minnesota Public Radio, the Star Tribune, Twin Cities Public Television, as well as, once again, the Metropolitan Regional Arts Council and the Minnesota State Arts Board for their support. Thanks most especially to all our viewers for watching, and to our two amazing authors. Thanks again, and good night.
Thank you, Erik.
Thank you. Thank you, audience.